What would you do if you heard the sound of a child crying in the middle of nowhere at 5 in the morning? For Texas rancher Sam Rodriguez, this question became a life-changing reality when he and his prize bull, Duke, discovered something by their fence line that would shake him to his core and remind him why some guardian angels come in the most unexpected forms. The morning of October 15th started like any other on the Lone Star Ranch, nestled in the rolling hills of East Texas, about 40 miles outside of Dallas. Sam Rodriguez, a weathered man of 53 with calloused hands and a heart bigger than his sprawling 3,000-acre property, was making his routine dawn patrol to check on his cattle. He had been ranching for over 30 years, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him, and he knew every sound, every shadow, and every rhythm of his land like a familiar song. Accompanying Sam on this particular morning was Duke, his magnificent Angus bull who had become something of a local legend. Standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, Duke was not just valuable breeding stock worth nearly $60,000. He was Sam's constant companion and seemed to possess an almost supernatural awareness of everything happening on the ranch. The massive black bull had an unusual habit of walking alongside Sam during the morning rounds, more like a loyal dog than a typical ranch animal. The October air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of dying leaves and the promise of winter when Sam first heard it. At exactly 5:17 a.m., according to the old pocket watch his grandfather had given him, a sound drifted across the pasture that made both man and bull stop dead in their tracks. It was the unmistakable sound of a child crying, not the distant wail of a baby, but the heartbroken sobbing of a young girl, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 8 if Sam's experience as a father of 3 was any indication. "What in the hell?" Sam muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped to his belt. His nearest neighbors, the McKinnon family, lived over 2 miles away, and their youngest daughter was already in high school. There should not have been any children anywhere near his property at this ungodly hour, especially not out in the open pasture where the crying seemed to be coming from. Duke's reaction was even more dramatic than Sam's. The massive bull's ears perked up immediately, and his entire body went rigid with attention. Then, without waiting for any command from Sam, Duke began walking purposefully toward the source of the crying, his heavy hooves making soft thudding sounds against the frost-covered grass. It was behavior Sam had never witnessed from any bull in his 3 decades of ranching. Duke was moving with the deliberate urgency of a rescue dog who had caught a scent. Following Duke's lead, Sam quickened his pace, his heart beginning to race as the crying grew louder and more distinct. The sound was coming from the direction of the north fence line, where his property bordered an old abandoned cotton field that had been left fallow for nearly a decade. As they approached the area, Sam could hear that the crying was not constant, but came in waves, punctuated by what sounded like gasping breaths and occasional words he couldn't quite make out. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the pasture and making it difficult to see clearly in the pre-dawn gloom. Sam pulled out his heavy-duty flashlight and swept the beam across the fence line, searching for the source of the heartbreaking sounds that were now clearly coming from just beyond his property boundary. What the flashlight beam revealed made Sam's blood run cold and his hands shake uncontrollably. About 20 feet past his fence, partially hidden behind a cluster of mesquite bushes, was a small figure huddled on the ground. Even from a distance, Sam could see that it was indeed a young girl, probably no more than 7 or 8 years old, wearing what appeared to be a torn and dirty pink nightgown that provided no protection against the morning chill. "Dear God," Sam whispered, his voice catching in his throat as the full implications of what he was seeing began to sink in. This child was not lost from a nearby camping trip or wandering away from a family picnic. She was alone, injured, and terrified in the middle of absolutely nowhere, wearing only night clothes, in weather that could easily lead to hypothermia. Sam's first instinct was to rush toward the girl immediately, but 30 years of ranching had taught him to think before acting, especially in situations that didn't make immediate sense. How had a young child ended up in this remote location? Where were her parents? Why was she wearing only a nightgown in near-freezing weather? The questions racing through his mind all pointed to scenarios that made his stomach churn with a mixture of anger and dread. Duke, meanwhile, had positioned himself at the fence line directly opposite the girl and was making soft, low sounds that Sam had never heard from him before, almost like the gentle lowing a mother cow makes to comfort a frightened calf. The bull's massive head was lowered, and he was looking directly at the child with what could only be described as protective concern. "Easy, girl," Sam called out softly as he approached the fence, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring despite the emotional turmoil he was feeling. "I'm here to help you. My name is Sam, and I'm going to take care of you." The little girl looked up at the sound of his voice, and what Sam saw nearly brought him to his knees. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, her blonde hair was tangled and matted, and her blue eyes held a terror that no child should ever experience. But what made Sam's hands clench into fists with rage were the visible bruises on her arms and face, and the way she instinctively recoiled when she saw him approaching. "Please don't hurt me," the little girl whispered, her voice so quiet that Sam had to strain to hear her. "I've been good. I promise I've been good." Those words hit Sam like a physical blow. In that moment, he understood that this child had not simply wandered away from safety. She had been running from something far worse. The nightgown, the bruises, the terror in her eyes, and her location in the middle of nowhere all told a story that Sam recognized from news reports and police bulletins, a story that made him want to find whoever had hurt this innocent child and make them pay. "Sweetheart, I'm not going to hurt you," Sam said, his voice gentle but firm as he began climbing through his fence to reach her. "Nobody is going to hurt you ever again. I promise you that." As Sam slowly approached the terrified child, Duke moved along the fence line to stay as close as possible, continuing to make those soft, comforting sounds. The bull seemed to understand instinctively that this little girl needed protection, and he was positioning himself to provide it in any way he could. When Sam finally reached the child, he could see the full extent of her condition, and it took every ounce of his self-control not to let his fury show on his face. She was obviously dehydrated, probably hadn't eaten in days, and was suffering from exposure to the elements. Her feet were bare and cut from walking over rough ground, and the bruises on her body suggested systematic abuse that had been going on for some time. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Sam asked gently, as he carefully removed his heavy ranching jacket and wrapped it around the shivering child. "Emma," she whispered, looking up at him with those haunted blue eyes. "My name is Emma, and I just want to go home, but I don't remember where home is anymore." As Sam lifted the little girl into his arms and began walking back toward his house, with Duke following protectively alongside them, he made a silent vow that he would move heaven and earth to find out who had hurt this innocent child and make sure they faced justice. He also knew that his life had just changed forever, because he was looking at a little girl who desperately needed someone to fight for her, and Sam Rodriguez had never backed down from a fight when it mattered. The crying had stopped, but Sam's work was just beginning. Emma's story was about to unfold, and it would prove to be even more devastating than he could have imagined. As Sam carried Emma toward his ranch house, the little girl's tiny arms wrapped around his neck with a desperation that broke his heart. Duke walked alongside them, never straying more than a few feet away, his massive presence somehow providing comfort to both the frightened child and the determined rancher. The sun was rising higher now, painting the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, but Sam barely noticed the beauty of the morning. His entire focus was on getting this traumatized child the help she desperately needed. Sam's wife, Maria, was already awake in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard the front door open. A registered nurse with 25 years of experience at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital, Maria had seen every kind of trauma imaginable, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight of her husband carrying a battered child through their doorway. "Jesus Cristo," Maria whispered in Spanish, her coffee mug clattering to the floor as she rushed toward them. Her trained eyes immediately assessed Emma's condition, the dehydration, the untreated cuts and bruises, the way the child flinched at sudden movements, and most telling of all, the hollow look in her eyes that spoke of prolonged trauma. "I found her by the north fence," Sam explained quickly, as Maria gently took Emma from his arms. "She's been out there alone, probably for days. Look at her feet, Maria. Look at what someone did to this baby." Maria's face hardened with professional determination as she examined Emma's injuries. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately, but first we need to warm her up and get some fluids in her. Sam, call 911 and tell them we have a child victim of suspected abuse. Then call Sheriff Morrison." Before we continue with Emma's incredible journey toward healing and the shocking truth about how she ended up alone in that field, I need to ask you for something that would mean the world to me. If this story is touching your heart and you're rooting for this brave little girl to find the safety and love she deserves, please take just 1 second to hit that like button below. Your support helps these important stories reach more people who need to hear them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell, because Emma's story is about to take some unexpected turns that will restore your faith in human kindness. Trust me when I tell you that what happens next will show you the incredible power of compassion and the healing that's possible when strangers become family. Now, let's get back to Emma and the amazing people who refused to give up on her. While Sam made the necessary phone calls, Maria worked with the gentle efficiency that had made her one of the most respected nurses in Dallas. She wrapped Emma in warm blankets, started her on small sips of electrolyte solution, and began the delicate process of cleaning and treating her wounds. Throughout it all, she spoke to the frightened child in both English and Spanish, her voice soft and reassuring. "Mija, you're safe now," Maria murmured as she carefully cleaned a cut on Emma's foot. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. We're going to take very good care of you." Emma had barely spoken since Sam brought her inside, but she seemed to respond to Maria's gentle touch and soothing voice. When the paramedics arrived 20 minutes later, followed closely by Sheriff Morrison and a social worker from Child Protective Services, Emma clung to Maria's hand and refused to let go. "Doctor, Sarah Mitchell at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital had seen many cases of child abuse during her 15-year career in pediatric emergency medicine, but Emma's case stood out for both its severity and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her discovery. The medical examination revealed evidence of prolonged physical abuse, severe malnutrition, and signs that the child had been living in deplorable conditions for an extended period. "This level of trauma doesn't happen overnight, Doctor," Mitchell explained to Sam and Maria in the hospital hallway. "This child has been systematically abused for months, possibly years. The fact that she survived being abandoned in that field is nothing short of miraculous." What made Emma's case even more puzzling was that despite an immediate investigation by local and state authorities, no missing child reports matched her description. It was as if she had simply materialized from nowhere, with no family looking for her and no record of her existence in any database. Detective Lisa Chen, a specialist in crimes against children, interviewed Emma multiple times over the following days, but the traumatized child could provide few details about her past. She remembered being kept in a dark room, being told she was bad, and being hurt by people she called the mean ones, but she couldn't recall her last name, where she had lived, or how she had escaped to end up in Sam's field. It's not uncommon for children who've experienced severe trauma to have memory gaps. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the child psychologist assigned to Emma's case, explained to the growing team of people working to help her. Her mind is protecting her from memories that are too painful to process. With time and proper treatment, some of these memories may return, but our focus should be on her healing, not on forcing her to relive her trauma. Sam and Maria visited Emma every day during her 2-week hospital stay, bringing small gifts and spending hours reading to her and simply being present. They were amazed by the child's resilience and her gradual willingness to trust again. Emma seemed especially fond of the pictures Sam showed her of Duke and the other animals on the ranch, and she asked repeatedly when she could see the nice cow again. "He's not a cow, Mija," Sam explained with a gentle smile. "Duke is a bull, and he's been asking about you, too. I think he knew you needed help that morning." The breakthrough in Emma's case came from an unexpected source. Duke himself seemed to hold a key to the mystery. During Emma's hospital stay, the massive bull had been acting strangely, spending most of his time near the north fence where they had found the little girl. Ranch hand Miguel Santos mentioned to Sam that Duke kept staring toward the abandoned cotton field and making agitated sounds, as if he sensed something that the humans couldn't detect. Acting on a hunch, Sam decided to explore the area more thoroughly. What he discovered in the abandoned field would change everything, and finally provide answers about where Emma had come from and how she had survived the impossible journey that had brought her to safety. Hidden in a grove of trees about half a mile from where they had found Emma was the remains of what appeared to be a makeshift camp. There were empty water bottles, discarded food containers, and most telling of all, small pieces of torn fabric that matched the nightgown Emma had been wearing. It was clear that someone had been living rough in this area, and the evidence suggested that Emma had been hiding there for several days before Duke and Sam found her. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Following a trail of disturbed vegetation and more fabric scraps, Sam found what appeared to be the remnants of a vehicle crash about 2 miles deeper into the abandoned property. A van had apparently run off an old logging road and crashed into a ravine, hidden from view by dense undergrowth and largely concealed from anyone who might have been searching from the road. Inside the wreckage, investigators found evidence that would finally begin to piece together Emma's story and reveal the incredible journey of survival that had brought her to Sam's ranch. The little girl had endured far more than anyone could have imagined, but she had also shown a strength and determination that amazed everyone who heard her story. As Emma continued to heal in the hospital, surrounded by people who cared about her and determined to give her the love and protection she deserved. It became clear that her rescue by Sam and Duke had been just the beginning of a much larger story. The abandoned van in the ravine held secrets that would not only explain how Emma had survived the impossible, but also lead to justice for those who had hurt her and closure for other families who had been searching for their own missing children. The little girl who had appeared from nowhere was about to help solve mysteries that had puzzled law enforcement for years, proving that sometimes the most broken souls carry within them the strength to heal not just themselves, but entire communities that had been touched by tragedy. The investigation into the crashed van revealed a story so horrifying that even seasoned law enforcement officers struggled to process the full scope of what Emma had endured. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres, who specialized in human trafficking cases, arrived from Dallas to lead the expanded investigation that would ultimately uncover one of the largest child trafficking operations in Texas history. Inside the mangled vehicle, investigators found identification documents, cell phones, and most critically, a laptop computer that contained detailed records of a network that had been operating across multiple states for nearly a decade. The van had been driven by Marcus Webb and Jennifer Collins, two individuals who were already wanted by federal authorities in connection with several missing children cases. What we discovered in that laptop was beyond anything we had encountered before, Agent Torres explained to Sam and Maria during a briefing at the sheriff's office. Emma wasn't just a victim of abuse. She was part of a systematic trafficking operation that moved children across state lines. The records show that she had been held captive for over 18 months. The forensic analysis of the computer files revealed that Emma's real name was Emma Grace Patterson, and she had been kidnapped from a playground in Oklahoma City when she was 6 years old. Her disappearance had sparked a massive search effort, but the trail had gone cold after the first few weeks. Her parents, David and Jennifer Patterson, had never stopped looking for their daughter, and the FBI had been working their case for nearly 2 years. According to the digital evidence, Emma had been moved between several locations across Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, held in deplorable conditions and subjected to unimaginable abuse. The night of her escape had been the result of a transportation gone wrong. Webb and Collins had been driving Emma and 2 other children to a new location when they lost control of the van during a severe thunderstorm and crashed into the ravine. The crash analysis shows that both traffickers died on impact, Sheriff Morrison explained to the growing team of investigators. But somehow, Emma survived. She managed to get out of the wreckage, and with injuries that should have incapacitated an adult, she walked nearly 3 miles through rough terrain to reach your property. What made Emma's survival even more remarkable was the timeline that investigators were able to piece together. The crash had occurred 5 days before Sam and Duke found her, meaning that the 7-year-old girl had managed to stay alive in the wilderness for nearly a week, finding water from streams, eating berries and anything else she could forage, and somehow avoiding the search teams that had been looking for the missing van. Dr. Mitchell was amazed when she learned the full extent of Emma's ordeal. The level of trauma this child has survived is extraordinary. The fact that she maintained the will to live, the strength to escape from that wreckage, and the determination to keep walking until she found help speaks to an incredible inner resilience that most adults don't possess. The breakthrough in contacting Emma's birth parents came when Agent Torres showed the little girl photographs of David and Jennifer Patterson. For the first time since her rescue, Emma's face lit up with genuine recognition and joy. "Mama, Papa!" she cried out, pointing at the photographs with tears streaming down her face. "I knew they would find me. I knew they were looking for me." The reunion between Emma and her parents took place at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital, 3 weeks after Sam had found her by the fence. David Patterson, a construction foreman, and Jennifer Patterson, an elementary school teacher, had driven through the night from Oklahoma City after receiving the call that their daughter had been found alive. "We never gave up hope," Jennifer sobbed as she held Emma for the first time in 18 months. "Every single day, we prayed that someone would find you and bring you home to us. We love you so much, baby girl." David Patterson's first request after embracing his daughter was to meet the man who had saved her life. When Sam and Maria arrived at the hospital that afternoon, they found a family transformed by joy and gratitude, but also a man who understood the magnitude of what Sam had done. "You saved my daughter's life," David said, his voice breaking with emotion as he shook Sam's hand. "If you hadn't found her when you did, if you hadn't cared enough to investigate that crying, I don't know if we would ever have gotten her back." But even as Emma was reunited with her biological parents, it became clear that her recovery would be a long and complex process. "Doctor," Vasquez explained that Emma had formed strong attachment bonds with Sam and Maria during her hospitalization, and that these relationships had been crucial to her initial healing process. Emma has been through an experience that would break most people, Dr. Vasquez explained to both families during a joint meeting. The fact that she was able to trust Sam and Maria so quickly, and that they provided such consistent care and emotional support, has been essential to her psychological recovery. Moving forward, she's going to need the love and support of everyone who cares about her. The Pattersons, who had spent 18 months in their own kind of hell, were incredibly grateful to Sam and Maria for the care they had provided their daughter. Rather than seeing the Rodriguez family as a complication, they embraced them as extended family who had played a crucial role in Emma's survival and recovery. "You're not losing a daughter," Jennifer Patterson told Maria through tears. "You're gaining a family. Emma talks about you and Sam constantly and about Duke. She wants to know when she can visit the ranch again." The ongoing investigation into the trafficking network that had held Emma captive led to the arrest of 12 additional suspects across 4 states and the rescue of 6 other children who had been held in similar conditions. Emma's survival and the evidence found in the crashed van had been the key to breaking open a case that federal authorities had been pursuing for years. Agent Torres made a point of visiting Emma during her final week in the hospital to explain how important her case had been to the broader investigation. "Because you were so brave, Emma. Because you survived and led us to that van, we were able to save other children who were in the same kind of trouble you were in. You're a hero." Emma's response to this news was typically humble and wise beyond her years. "I'm not a hero," she said quietly. "Sam and Duke are the heroes. They're the ones who saved me." As Emma prepared to return home to Oklahoma with her parents, plans were already being made for regular visits to the Lone Star Ranch. The Pattersons had purchased a small vacation home just 20 miles from Sam's property, ensuring that Emma could maintain her relationship with the family who had literally saved her life. Duke seemed to understand that his role in Emma's rescue had been special. On the day before Emma left the hospital, Sam brought the massive bull as close to the building as hospital regulations would allow. Through a first-floor window, Emma was able to see her gentle giant one more time and wave goodbye. "Thank you for finding me, Duke," she called out through the glass. "Thank you for knowing I needed help." The bull's response was a soft, gentle lowing that seemed to acknowledge her words. Even the hospital staff who witnessed the interaction were moved to tears by the obvious bond between the traumatized child and the animal who had somehow sensed her desperate need for rescue. As Emma's story spread through the media, it became a symbol of hope for other families dealing with missing children, and a reminder that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. The little girl who had appeared from nowhere, crying at dawn by a ranch fence, had not only found her way back to her family, but had also helped bring justice to those who had hurt her and safety to other children who had suffered similar fates. But perhaps most importantly, Emma's story had created an extended family bound together not by blood, but by love, compassion, and the shared understanding that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the darkest moments, when strangers choose to become heroes simply by refusing to walk away from someone in need. 1 year later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the Lone Star Ranch as Emma Grace Patterson ran through the pasture with Duke, following protectively behind her, his massive frame moving with surprising gentleness as he kept pace with the 8-year-old girl who had become the light of so many lives. The transformation in Emma was nothing short of miraculous. The terrified, broken child who had been found crying by the fence had blossomed into a confident, joyful little girl surrounded by 2 families who loved her unconditionally. The Patterson family's vacation home had become a second residence, with Emma spending every weekend and most school holidays at the ranch with Sam and Maria. The arrangement had worked perfectly for everyone involved, giving Emma the stability of her reunited biological family while maintaining the healing relationships that had been so crucial to her recovery. "Mira, Duke, look what I can do!" Emma called out in the mixture of English and Spanish she had learned from Maria as she demonstrated a cartwheel she had been practicing. Duke responded with his characteristic gentle lowing, a sound that had become as familiar and comforting to Emma as her own heartbeat. Dr. Vasquez had initially been concerned about Emma maintaining relationships with multiple families, worried that it might confuse her sense of identity or belonging. Instead, the opposite had happened. Having multiple sources of love and support had given Emma a security and confidence that allowed her to heal more completely than anyone had dared to hope. "Emma is thriving because she knows she is loved unconditionally by multiple people," Dr. Vasquez explained during one of their final therapy sessions. Rather than feeling torn between families, she feels abundantly blessed. The trauma that could have defined her life has instead become the foundation for an extraordinary story of resilience and love. The legal proceedings against the trafficking network had concluded 6 months earlier with sentences that ensured none of the perpetrators would ever have the opportunity to hurt children again. Marcus Webb and Jennifer Collins had died in the crash, but their associates received prison terms ranging from 25 years to life without parole. Emma had not been required to testify, but her survival and the evidence found in the crashed van had been instrumental in securing convictions. Agent Torres had kept in touch with both families throughout the legal process, and she made a point of visiting Emma on the first anniversary of her rescue. "I wanted you to know that, because you were so brave, because you survived and led us to the evidence we needed, 15 children have been rescued and are now safe with their families," she told Emma during a barbecue at the ranch. Emma's response demonstrated the wisdom and compassion that had amazed everyone who knew her. "I'm glad the other kids are safe," she said seriously. "But I wish they didn't have to be scared like I was. Maybe when I grow up, I can help other kids who get lost find their way home too." This desire to help others had become a defining characteristic of Emma's personality as she healed. She had started a small fundraiser at her school in Oklahoma City to help other missing children, and she regularly sent care packages to the children's shelter where some of the rescued trafficking victims were staying while they awaited placement with families. David and Jennifer Patterson had initially struggled with guilt over their daughter's kidnapping, wondering if they could have done something differently to prevent it. But Emma's remarkable recovery and the love she had found with the Rodriguez family had helped them understand that healing was more important than blame. "Emma has taught us that love multiplies rather than divides," Jennifer Patterson explained to a group of parents dealing with missing children during a support group meeting. "We thought we might lose her again when she bonded so strongly with Sam and Maria, but instead we gained a bigger family, and Emma gained more people who would do anything to protect her." The relationship between Duke and Emma had continued to amaze animal behaviorists and veterinarians who studied their bond. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been documenting their interaction for a research paper on animal-human connections, noted that Duke displayed protective behaviors toward Emma that were typically only seen between a mother animal and her offspring. "Duke seems to have appointed himself as Emma's guardian," Dr. Chen observed as she watched the bull carefully position himself between Emma and a group of curious horses. "He displays the same vigilance and protective instincts that a mother cow shows toward her calf. It's as if he understands that this child was vulnerable when he found her, and he's determined to ensure that she stays safe." Emma's 8th birthday party was celebrated at the ranch with both families present, along with Sheriff Morrison, Agent Torres, Dr. Mitchell, and many of the other people who had played roles in her rescue and recovery. The guest of honor, however, was Duke, who wore a special halter decorated with ribbons and received his own birthday cake made from his favorite treats. "Duke gets the first piece," Emma announced to the assembled guests, "because if he hadn't heard me crying that morning, I might still be lost. He's the real hero of my story." Sam watched the celebration with tears in his eyes, thinking back to that dawn morning when he had first heard Emma's cries. At the time, he had simply been doing what any decent person would do, helping a child in need. He had never imagined that single act of compassion would create such an extended family and have such a profound impact on so many lives. Maria had embraced her role as Emma's Abuela Maria with the same dedication she had shown as a nurse, providing the stable, nurturing presence that allowed Emma to feel safe enough to fully heal. "That little girl taught me that family isn't just about blood," Maria often said. "Sometimes the people who become most important to us are the ones who choose to love us when we need it most." The media attention surrounding Emma's story had gradually faded, but the impact continued to ripple outward in ways that none of them had anticipated. The Lone Star Ranch had become a model for therapy programs that paired traumatized children with gentle animals, and Sam and Maria had begun hosting other rescued children for weekend visits, where they could experience the healing power of connection with animals and nature. Emma's bedroom at the ranch was filled with letters from children around the world who had heard her story and found hope in her recovery. She answered as many as she could, always including a picture of Duke and a message about the importance of never giving up hope. "Even when things seem really scary and you don't know if anyone is looking for you, someone is," she would write in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. "And sometimes help comes from places you never expected, like a big, gentle bull who knows when someone needs to be saved." As the sun set over the Texas hills on the anniversary of Emma's rescue, she sat on the fence rail next to Sam, watching Duke graze peacefully in the pasture. The little girl who had once been too traumatized to speak now chattered constantly about her plans for the future, her friends at school, and her excitement about starting horseback riding lessons. "Sam," Emma said thoughtfully as they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, "do you think Duke knew that finding me would make so many people happy?" Sam considered the question seriously, looking at the massive bull who had somehow sensed a child's desperate need for help and led them to her rescue. "I think Duke knew that you were special, sweetheart, and I think he knew that you deserved to be safe and loved. Sometimes animals understand things about people that we don't even understand about ourselves." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened with the resilience that had carried her through her darkest moments. "I'm going to make sure I deserve all the love I've been given. I'm going to help other kids who get lost find their families too, just like Duke helped me find mine." As they walked back toward the house, Emma skipping ahead while Duke followed at a respectful distance, Sam reflected on how a single moment of compassion had changed so many lives. The little girl who had appeared from nowhere, crying at dawn by his fence, had brought together families, inspired a community, and proven that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and love could triumph over evil. Emma Grace Patterson was no longer the traumatized child who had been found broken and alone. She was a survivor, a hero, and most importantly, a beloved daughter who belonged to multiple families bound together by the understanding that love is not diminished when shared, but multiplied beyond measure. The crying had stopped long ago, replaced by laughter, hope, and the unbreakable bonds formed when strangers choose to become family. And in the pasture, Duke continued his gentle watch, the guardian angel who had appeared in the form of a 2,000-pound bull, ready to protect the little girl who had taught them all that miracles happen when compassion meets courage, and that sometimes the most profound acts of heroism come from simply refusing to ignore the cry of someone in need.